Hello, John Jerkovich here with Ask the Loan Guy. I got a question today, and the question was, John, hey, what is this Frank Dodd thing, Dodd Frank, that I hear about in the news that it looks like new president-elect Mr. Trump wants to do away with? Is that good for me? Is it bad for me? How does it impact the mortgage business? And really, what is it? What it is, it's a piece of legislation that was passed back in 2010. That's 12,000 pages. It was 12,000 pages put together by a guy named Barney Frank and Chris Dodd, both of which have never worked in the financial business and are more or less lifelong politicians. But they put this together with the thought and the idea of protecting you as the consumer. Some would say that this piece of legislation has killed the small banks. However, I have a little chart here. This is small banks going back to, I believe 1990, and we can see that the decline of small banks, it didn't really impact the decline of small banks because they've been declining all the way since back in 1990, but can definitely say that this piece of legislation did not help the small banks. Others will say that it's made lending very, very difficult. It's made it harder. It's allowed for a bunch of things just to make the lending industry and the financial industry tougher. And I think that there are some arguments there. Our home ownership rates are currently very close to all-time lows. They've only measured this since going back to about 1965, and home ownership rates were actually the lowest they'd ever been in the second quarter of 2016. I've got a chart for you here too. I've printed up some stuff. This right here is back 1965, and as you move across, this was home ownership rates in the U.S. Right back here is where I was born. I'm an old man with my gray beard, but as you can see, they hit a peak here back in 2004 with 69.2% of people. This right here, little dot, is kind of when the mortgage crisis happened. Here's when Frank Dodd was introduced, and here's where home ownership rates have went since. You could probably argue that it's a stale economy, people aren't making as much money, a variety of reasons, but I definitely believe that the Frank Dodd laws, Dodd Frank, have definitely impacted the mortgage business. I've been doing this for almost 20 years and can say that it is more difficult with all of the technologies and everything that's out there. It is more difficult today to originate and get a mortgage than it's probably ever been. And that probably has something to do with the home ownership rates. People just don't want to go through the process. It's extremely difficult. However, there's tons of good mortgage companies out there that can help and walk you through and navigate you through that process, but it probably is a little bit more cumbersome today. There's things like a qualified mortgage where we have to verify a lot more information in order to do this. And the one thing that I think is interesting about the whole thing is that since I've been doing this over a 20-year window, banks, regardless of the legislation and those kind of things, have made, or lending companies have made, about the same amount of money per loan on a percentage basis. So with all of this additional legislation, regulation, people that need to be hired, all that's happened as far as protecting you, the consumer, is those additional fees, costs, all of that stuff, it's passed on to you. So a bill that was intended to ultimately help you or to help the consumer to make it better, more user-friendly, it's probably ultimately resulted in higher fees, more costs associated with your loan. And as we can see with home ownership rates at the lowest they've been since they've ever measured these, or very close to today, I would say that doing away with that piece of legislation, or at least a lot of the big chunks, is very helpful. And then there's also been a lot of complaints over the CFPB. That's the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau. They're the ones out there that are assessing all these fines to these large banks. Just think about it. When Wells Fargo pays a really big fine, if you bank with Wells Fargo, that fine is ultimately trickled down and passed on to you. So just something to think about there. Doing away with Frank Dodd should make it easier for you to go out and obtain financing, easier for people to start lending money, and ultimately helping more people realize the American dream. Now, it must be done responsibly, but the Dodd Frank bill has been something that has made the lending world more difficult, and any reform that can be done to that is probably greatly appreciated. If you have any questions, please email me at john@asktheloanguy.com, or send me a message at Twitter. Ask_the loan guy. That's really it. Please like, follow, and share. You have a fantastic day, and thank you for watching.